The supreme, profound, and sublime Dharma is difficult to encounter in a billion eons. Now I see it, hear it, receive it, and capture it. I vow to attain the true meaning of the Tathagata. In order to liberate all sentient beings, let us generate the supreme bodhicitta. Well, a journey to the West. Currently, we are looking at the part where Phuntsok Rinpoche had arrived in Hawaii, which is the first stop in United States. He stayed in Hawaii for 4 days. Today's title is the Manjushri Statue Bestowed by Manjushri. Manjushri refers to Phuntsok Rinpoche, or the second Manjushri rather, refers to Phuntsok Rinpoche. In that afternoon, after giving the Bodhisattva vow, although His Holiness was supposed to take a good rest and get over the jet lag, because we know that there is a big time difference between China and the United States. However, many local people arrived at the temple after hearing that Phuntsok Rinpoche had visited, and then they wanted to meet with him and wish to receive his blessings. Whenever Phuntsok Rinpoche travels, as long as his time and health permits, he would see them. Sometimes we would say that meeting the teacher or not is the same, but sometimes I think it is a bit different, and it's important to actually meet the teacher, especially some of the great venerable masters. Meeting them could really plant some virtuous seeds for people to study the Dharma. And then at that time, many Westerners really loved, since they really loved questions. And their questions are rather very different than the Asians, because all the Eastern practitioners usually would ask for blessings, to seek for wealth and happiness and things and so on. But the Westerners asked lots of questions about Tibet and Larungar. And out of curiosity, many people came up with a great number of questions regarding His Holiness himself, Larungar, land of Tibet, and so forth. And a man particularly asked His Holiness, saying that I've heard during Cultural Revolution, when Red Guard found you meditating in a cave, they attempted to drag you away. However, at that moment, you managed to quickly increase the size and weight of the body, so they failed to move you. How did you do that? Amused, and His Holiness answered, that was only their perception. I was just playing with them. Well, in fact, in his biography, there is not much of the description of such. Rather, it was Phuntsok Rinpoche's face swallowed, and was very swollen, and then his face appeared to be much bigger, and it's included in the biography of his. So Phuntsok Rinpoche simply said that that was only their perception. I was just playing with them. And then there was I specifically remembered a person named Miguel Schwab. He's a Westerner. He's probably 12 years older than me, since we share the same Chinese zodiac animal, which is tiger. He's probably over 70 years of age, and he was the one who hosted us. He speaks some Lhasa Tibetan, but Phuntsok Rinpoche didn't understand too much of it. Sometimes when Phuntsok Rinpoche doesn't have too much class to teach, and when he has some time, Miguel would go to Phuntsok Rinpoche and then chat with him. On top of that, Phuntsok Rinpoche manifested some miraculous actions to him, and I thought that was very rare. Back in 2017, I specifically sent someone to interview him. Initially, I wanted to go to Hawaii University and a few other universities. It was all prepared, but couldn't make that trip. Anyhow, since I was collecting information and documents around that trip around that period of time, so I sent someone to interview him on the 20th of October 2017. Over here, Miguel asked Pontsog Rinpoche, saying that, how was your pilgrimage to Mount Wutai? And then Pontsog Rinpoche said, oh, there were too many people on my way to Mount Wutai. Since the news about my visit spread very quickly, more and more people gathered in the group. Since most people took the train got more and more crowded, and then the overpacked train even worried the police. In fact, not just the police, it worried the central government of CPP as well. The religious bureau sent their deputy chief to come to Mount Wutai, and since there were a group of people on the Bodhisattva peak back then, and they tried to intervene with us. Anyhow, most people in the Han Chinese regions had no idea of Tibetan Buddhism, but they wanted to go on a pilgrimage with me anyhow. Eventually, well, actually, I did not want to simply make pilgrimage. I prefer doing a retreat. Well, at first, Pontsog Rinpoche said that we should chant the aspiration prayer of Samadabhadra. However, lots of the Dharma activities were rather quite inconvenient because of the intervention. And then Pontsog Rinpoche said that, why don't you also go into retreat, and I will go into retreat as well. And then people slowly just vanished in the mountains, so to speak. And then Miguel continued to ask, did you meet Bodhisattva Manjushri? And then Rinpoche said, of course, I met Manjushri when my retreat at Sudhana Cave was about to end, so I knew that retreat must be very good. And then Miguel followed up saying that, did you get anything from Manjushri? And Rinpoche answered, yes, here. And then while replying, he gently raised his hand to the top of his head. Immediately, a small statue about 3 inches tall appeared in his hand. He just simply touched his crown, and then he got that statue. Miguel saw that through his eyes. I don't think I was there because I don't have that memory. I'm not so sure if I wasn't there. I wasn't sure what I was doing. Miguel still remembered that I was often being around Pontsog Rinpoche. He remembered me. Not many people remembered me. In fact, the majority of the people, when I asked, they didn't remember seeing me around Pontsog Rinpoche, but Miguel remembered that I was often around Pontsog Rinpoche. And Miguel said Pontsog Rinpoche, out of space, just took out a Buddha statue. Back in the year 1986, when we were around the sacred mountain, Pontsog Rinpoche did take out a Buddha statue. We all had seen it, and that statue did not disappear within his hand. He rather kept it wrapped in a katak and put it away. And then, while my eyes were glued on that statue, Rinpoche gracefully handed it to me. With excitement, I immediately reached my hand to it. After quickly touching the top of my hand with it, I held it so closely to my eyes and gazed at it carefully. It occurred to me, this is unbelievable. I'm holding a Manjushri statue bestowed by Bodhisattva Manjushri. He truly has devotion to Pontsog Rinpoche, and he sees Pontsog Rinpoche as Bodhisattva Manjushri. It is maybe because of his devotion, and he saw this beautiful statue where it waited on his hands, and it is definitely not an illusion. There are some practitioners like to speak of miraculous things that happen to them, but I think Westerners usually do not like to speak of it because majority of people are rather prefer something logical, and they don't like to speak of miraculous things very much. So he held it for 3 to 4 minutes and then gave it back to Phuntsok Rinpoche, and then it disappeared from his hands. He saw it through his own eyes. In fact, this is really meaningful. After I heard about it, I specifically asked them to interview him, and it's really wonderful to record such personal encounters. And these kinds of encounters is not an exaggeration. At that time, Miguel was quite shocked and impressed. And he thought to himself that it must have something to do with the previous reincarnation of Phuntsok Rinpoche, which was Liraplimpa, the great turtle. And he felt that he was so fortunate. He did not think that there are many chances to see what he had seen. He still remembered that encounter very clearly. He even remembered how we were stopped at the customs because of Tsampa, and he remembered he was waiting for us for a long period of time. Unlike how we have cell phones and we can communicate on time, we couldn't communicate with the others. Back then, he waited for us without knowing what had happened. He only saw that the airplane had landed, but we just didn't get out. And he wrote his memory as such. And then the next part is introduction to the great perfection. When imparting the Bodhisattva vow in the morning, Phuntsok Rinpoche mentioned the two most essential trainings in Tibetan Buddhism were the practice of bodhicitta and the great perfection. Initially, Phuntsok Rinpoche was going to give the teachings on the second day to give the empowerment and the guidance on the peaceful Manjushri practice. But because many people within Nechon Temple had a great longing to receive the Dharma teachings, and in order to let the disciples to understand the lineage of Mahaati, also to generate faith to Mahaati, Phuntsok Rinpoche had this additional class. I wasn't sure if this is free. If it's an additional class, I believe it could be free. But usually the classes are not free. Phuntsok Rinpoche over here said that you're the embodiment of wisdom and power of all Buddhas, who graciously upholds countless wheels of mandalas and takes the appearances as a great sage in this world. You are the unparalleled lotus king of the supreme vehicle. This is a praise, a homage verse to Padmasambhava. In fact, over here it speaks of let it be the heretics or the Buddhists at the time of giving Dharma teachings, listening to Dharma teachings and practice. Whatever kinds of practices you engage in, you need to make homage to the deity. This is a common practice of those who hold on to a particular lineage. So Phuntsok Rinpoche here says that for anyone who embraces a religious tradition, whether a Buddhist or a follower of other religions at times, such as giving or receiving teachings and engaging in practices, it is normally required to first praise and pay homage to their principal deity. Following the common practice here, I praise and pay homage to my own principal deity and make the commitment to turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings that have karmic connections with me. I had mentioned this before, that Phuntsok Rinpoche had never been to the West before, but it seems that Phuntsok Rinpoche was able to give Dharma teachings to the Westerners, and the Westerners are rather very easily to accept the way he teaches as well. Phuntsok Rinpoche uses rather very simple language to give teachings compared to if he were to give teachings to the Tibetans, he would have used lots of quotations and logical inferences and so on. But he rather used the common language when it comes to giving teachings to the Westerners. And for those of you who may not know too much about Buddhism, I think this kind of method of teaching would be easily to be accepted. And then he continued to say that according to the extraordinary tradition of Mahayana, as I mentioned earlier, it is indispensable to generate the supreme enlightened mind, bodhicitta, every time one starts to give teachings, receiving teachings, or engaging in practices. It is indispensable to generate a bodhicitta. Speaking of the attitude of listening to a Dharma teaching, one should tune the mind with the aspiration, I am listening to the Dharma in order to place all sentient beings in the state of Buddhahood. Such attitude is very crucial. I'm not sure if you can develop certain kinds of different feelings when it comes to Phuntsok Rinpoche's teachings to the Westerners. But for me, I feel that his way of teaching to the Westerners is quite friendly and very easy to understand, because usually when he teaches in Tibetan, his way of teaching is rather have lots of leaping logics, or sometimes it would talk about more of the profound Dharma teachings. But rather over here, he is giving Dharma teachings like how he would chat with someone secular. And it's very easy for them to understand. So how could one gain ability to place sentient beings in Buddhahood through listening? To this question, let us refer a teaching of Shakyamuni Buddha. The Buddha said that the merit of meditating for 9 years is not as great as teaching or hearing the Dharma once. That is to say, if we do a 9-year solitary retreat, it is less beneficial than if we listen to the Dharma in front of a qualified teacher and contemplate its meaning. Therefore, those who aim to benefit sentient beings listen to the Dharma is particularly necessary. Moreover, the Buddha also taught in scripture that in order to signify the commencement of a Dharma teaching, it is necessary to first sound the Dharma drum or blow the conch and strike a Dharma gong. If anyone hears this sound, even if as an animal, a beast, or a bird, the door of the lower realms is blocked for them, and they will no longer take such a lowly rebirth. If that kind of benefit can be produced, then it is needless to say that listening to the Dharma is of inconceivable benefit. Through listening to the Dharma, we can dispel the darkness of our ignorance and foolishness. When you encounter a wise person, listening to the teachings of instructions for him or her is the best gift you can receive, through which you will gain incredible benefit in this lifetime. Further, receiving Dharma teachings brings about a great benefit for our future lifetimes. As said in a sutra, even if you repeatedly make offerings to the meritorious field of the three jewels and practice generosity to sentient beings in the lower realms for years, it is not as beneficial as listening to the Dharma only one single time. Also, some sutra says that building all kinds of stupas and statues of Buddhas all over the world with 7 types of precious gems is not as good as hearing a 4-line stanza of Mahayana teachings. For example, the stanzas such as the precious jewel-like bodhicitta and so on. It is also stated in many sutras that even if you make all sorts of material offerings and do all kinds of services every day to the Buddhas and Bodhisattva dwelling in the countless realms for 10 directions, it would not produce the same great merit as to hear our 4-line stanza in Mahayana teachings. Well, even for those of you who cannot listen to the Dharma teachings real time, if you were to listen to the recordings from some Dharma teachers or from certain lamas, if you were to listen to it every single day, or maybe one class a day, that is still quite significant and beneficial. Since listening to the Mahayana teaching has such great benefits, I hope you can listen to this teaching with good motivation. We should think that by the virtue of listening to this Dharma, may all sentient beings be free from suffering and experience happiness. We also listen to Dharma teaching with this kind of aspiration, isn't it? Maybe we can continue for another section. Well, before the actual teaching of Mahaati, he would speak of how Mahaati is connected to Lord Buddha. The appearance of Lord Buddha in this world. What kind of Dharma I'm going to teach today? Countless aeons ago, when our root teacher, the Lord of Great Compassion, the unsurpassable Buddha Shakyamuni, was in his causal stage of training, he met the great sage of Shakya, or who is called the Great Shakyamuni Buddha, the Tathagata Shakya Tupchen, who had appeared in the world at the time. He offered the Buddha a pair of boots, a Kashika parasol, and 500 seashells. He made the aspiration, thinking that in order to benefit sentient beings, I shall henceforth follow the Bodhisattva path. Afterward, he began the Bodhisattva training of the 6 paramitas in a gradual way. He practiced generosity, discipline, patience, diligence, and meditative concentration in order to accomplish the accumulation of conceptual merit. Also, he trained in the development of realization of emptiness of self to accumulate non-conceptual wisdom. As he devoted himself to these 2 types of accumulations in the first Asamkhya Kalpa, he was able to ascend to the path of accumulation and the path of unification. The first 2 Bodhisattva stages, which one is still an ordinary being, the second Asamkhya Kalpa, through the accumulation of more merit and the deeper purification of obscurations, he gradually entered the path of seeing and the path of meditation, passing through the first 7 impure bhumis. From the first bhumi to the extreme joy, all the way to the 7th bhumi. In the third Asamkhya Kalpa, he reached the final 3 pure Bodhisattva bhumis, the 8th, 9th, and the 10th bhumi. At the end of the 10th bhumi, he took birth in the Tushita heaven as a sage, called Dampa Tokarpo, meaning white crown god. There he turned the wheel of Dharma extensively for the celestial beings. Then, in order to tame and liberate sentient beings in Jambudvipa, on the 15th day of Ashada month, the 6th month in the midsummer of the earth sheep year, from Tushita heaven he entered the womb of Queen Maya Devi. And then after 10 full months, he was born from the right side of the Queen Maya Devi without causing her any pain in Lumbini Grove. Before the age of 29, he lived in Kapilavastu as a prince under the care of his father, King Shuddhadana. At the age of 29, driven by revulsion towards everything in samsara, he left the palace and shaved his royal hair in front of a stupa and renounced the lifestyle of a householder. On the bank of Niranjana River, he went through 6 years of austerity, drinking only 1 drop of water and eating only 1 grain of rice every day. This was to set an example for future practitioners and let them understand that practicing the sacred Dharma requires perseverance and austerity. In the late spring, on the 15th day of the 4th month Sagadawa, he attained perfect, complete, and unsurpassable enlightenment at the place that is known as the Vajra seat, Bodh Gaya in India. In fact, when you look at this part of the description, it is the 12 signs of attaining enlightenment, except this particular concise description is very well said and in such a beautiful language. If I were to ask you to give a concise explanation of the 12 signs of attaining enlightenment, would you be able to do that? You should consider it. And then at that time, after 49 days at Deer Park in Varanasi, he turned the 12th wheel of Dharma, in which he taught the Four Noble Truths. And then later he turned the second wheel of Dharma at the Vulture Peak, and then the third turning of the wheel. So this particular brief history was the Buddha's appearance in this world from the perspective of Sutrayana.
Adorable.